It's hard to pinpoint the exact moment when everything started to fall apart. It wasn't one single event, but a series of small things. Tiny cracks that grew wider and wider over time. I guess I was too afraid to see them for what they were. Too caught up in the routine of life, I kept telling myself that things would get better, that we'd find our way back. But deep down, I knew something had changed. When we first met, everything felt effortless. We couldn't get enough of each other. There was this spark, this energy between us that made every moment feel special. But over time, that spark started to dim. At first, I didn't want to admit it. I told myself it was just a phase. He was busy with work. We were both adjusting to life, to the responsibilities of being adults, of being in a committed relationship. But the truth was, he wasn't paying attention to me anymore. Not in the way he used to. There was always something else. Always someone else. I tried to talk to him about it, but he'd just nod and say everything was fine. The distance between us grew, but it wasn't just physical, it was emotional. And that's what hurt the most. The silence between us started to feel suffocating. I tried to fill the gap in other ways. I spent more time with friends, tried to focus on work, but nothing worked. I felt lonely even when he was in the room. And that's when I started to think about the past, about John. John wasn't just any ex. He was the one I always thought about when I remembered the carefree days of youth, the guy who made me feel alive. We broke up for all the usual reasons, but there was always a part of me that wondered, what if? What if things had turned out differently? What if we had worked through everything instead of letting it slip away? And then, one day, I bumped into him by chance. He was in town for business and suggested we grab a coffee. We met up, and as soon as we started talking, it felt like no time had passed. It was easy. Comfortable. We fell into old rhythms, and for the first time in months, I felt like someone was actually listening to me. It was like I'd found a part of myself I thought I had lost. I didn't think anything would come of it at first. I was just happy to reconnect. But the more we talked, the more I realized how much I missed him. How much I missed feeling wanted, important, cared for. I didn't want to admit it, but I was craving the connection I used to have. The connection that was missing in my marriage. I tried to ignore it at first. I told myself it was just a moment of weakness, that it didn't mean anything. But as the days went on, the thought of seeing him again became more and more tempting. So I did. That day, when we met up again, it felt like I was finally doing something for myself. I didn't feel guilty. Not at first. I was just so damn tired of feeling invisible. He was there. He was listening. And maybe, just maybe, he cared about me the way I wanted someone to care about me. But I knew this was wrong. I knew I was crossing a line, and yet, I couldn't stop myself. I justified it in my head. If he can't even see me anymore, if he doesn't care enough to notice me, then maybe I deserve this. Maybe I deserve to feel seen, to feel wanted. And for a while, being with John was like being able to breathe again. But then, things started to unravel. I knew I couldn't keep this up forever. The guilt was starting to gnaw at me, but I buried it deep, convincing myself that I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't hurting anyone. Not really. But then came the moment I couldn't ignore anymore. I didn't realize how much time had passed that afternoon until my phone buzzed. It was a call from my husband. I glanced at the screen and saw his name flashing. He had been calling me for over an hour. I froze, staring at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. I hadn't even noticed the time slip away like that. He never used to call me that much, not unless something was wrong. Shit, I quickly answered, my voice shaky. Where are you? He asked, his tone sharp, something in it that made my stomach tighten. You've been gone for hours. I've been trying to reach you. I felt a rush of panic. He sounded worried, and that made me feel worse. I wanted to tell him the truth, to explain where I was, what I'd been doing. But I couldn't. Not yet. Not when the reality of what I had done hit me all at once. I just needed some time to think, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm on my way home now. I could hear the silence on the other end of the line. I knew he was listening, waiting for something more, something I wasn't ready to give. I wasn't ready to explain how I had felt invisible for so long, how I had needed someone to care for me, and how I had found that in the arms of someone else. But before I could say anything more, he spoke again, his voice quieter this time. I've been calling you for an hour. Why didn't you pick up? I didn't know how to answer. I didn't know what to say. How do you admit that you've betrayed the person who loves you, the person who's always been there? I had no excuse, no way to make this right. "I'm sorry," was all I could manage. But it felt empty, hollow. As I hung up and got into my car, I couldn't stop thinking about how I had just put everything at risk. How my life, our life, had started to shatter in ways I never expected. And the worst part, I wasn't even sure if I regretted it. I drove home slowly, my mind spinning. The road was familiar, but tonight it felt different, colder, more uncertain. Every turn, every stoplight felt like a reminder of how far I had strayed from everything I knew. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had done something necessary, something I'd been craving for so long. When I walked through the door, I expected to find him waiting, sitting on the couch, ready to ask questions. But when I opened the door, the house was silent. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the quiet tick of the clock, but there was no sound of him. It made my heart race even faster. I looked around, almost as if searching for a sign that I hadn't just ruined everything. I wanted him to be angry. I wanted him to yell at me, to give me a reason to explain myself, to cry out for the trust I had broken. Instead, the emptiness of the house pressed in on me. I found him in our bedroom, sitting on the bed with his phone in his hand. He looked up at me when I entered, his eyes tired, but there was something different about his expression. It was like he was waiting for me to speak first, like he already knew, like he had always known. "Where have you been?" he asked, his voice low, controlled, but there was a sharpness in it, a tension that I hadn't heard before. I told you. I needed some time, just to think," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but it trembled anyway. He didn't reply right away. He just stared at me, and I could see the questions written all over his face. But he was holding them back, waiting for me to be honest. For me to admit what had happened. I sat down on the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of his gaze on me. This wasn't the first time I'd felt the distance between us. This wasn't the first time I'd felt like I was living with a stranger. But this was different. I couldn't even explain it to myself. I wasn't sure if I was trying to justify my actions or if I was just too scared to face the consequences of them. "I'm sorry," I said, almost automatically. "I didn't mean to make you worry. I just needed some space." He sighed and leaned back against the headboard, running a hand through his hair. He didn't look angry, not exactly. He just looked disappointed. And that was worse. "Why didn't you pick up when I called?" he asked, his voice quieter now, almost as if he were afraid of the answer. I felt my stomach twist. I wanted to tell him everything, but I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to say the words. I couldn't tell him that I had been with someone else, that I had sought comfort in someone who wasn't him. That I had betrayed him, not just physically, but emotionally as well. I don't know," I stammered. I guess I wasn't thinking." He raised an eyebrow. "You weren't thinking? Is that all you have to say?" The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. I could see the hurt in his eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to explain why I'd done what I did, why I had made the choice I had. "You know, I've been trying to figure this out for a while," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking. Maybe you've been pulling away for longer than I thought. Maybe you've been shutting me out, and I didn't even see it. But I never expected this." His words hit me like a punch in the chest. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't blaming me outright. But I could hear the sorrow in his voice. The pain that came from feeling like you were losing someone you loved without knowing why. "I'm sorry," I repeated, but it didn't feel like enough. It would never feel like enough. I stood up and walked toward the window, looking out at the darkening street. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel the weight of my actions crashing down on me. The betrayal. The lie. The fact that, somewhere deep down, I wasn't sure I regretted it. "You don't have to apologize," he said softly. "Not unless you mean it. Not unless you can tell me why you did it." His words hung in the air. He wasn't just asking me for an explanation. He was asking me to face the truth. To confront what I had done and why I had done it. And I couldn't. I wasn't ready to say it out loud. I wasn't ready to admit the cold, hard truth that I had crossed a line, and in doing so, I had broken something inside both of us. "I can't explain it," I whispered. "I don't know why. I felt like I needed something more. Something that was missing. And I found it. But it was wrong. I know it was wrong. But it didn't stop me." The words were barely audible, but they hung in the room like a confession. I didn't expect him to forgive me. I didn't expect anything. But I felt like I had to say it. I had to admit what I'd done, even if it was just to myself. He stood up and walked over to me, standing behind me at the window. He didn't touch me. He just stood there, silent. We both knew that nothing would ever be the same again. "I don't know what we're supposed to do now," he said quietly. "But I can't pretend like nothing happened." And with that, I knew everything had changed. There was no going back. Not now, not after this. The days that followed felt like a blur, a haze of guilt and shame, mixed with fleeting moments of clarity. I knew that things couldn't go back to the way they were, but I couldn't help but wonder if they ever could have been the way I wanted them to be in the first place. There was no easy answer, no easy way out. I could tell he was trying to make sense of it all, just as I was. But nothing was as it had been before. The weight of what I'd done hung between us, thick and suffocating. I woke up one morning to find him gone. The bed was empty, the covers pushed aside as if he had been up for hours. The house felt quieter without him, and for a moment, I wondered if maybe I had imagined the entire thing. If perhaps I could wake up, and everything would go back to normal. But then I saw the note he had left on the kitchen counter. It was short. Simple. "We need to talk." I knew what that meant. We both knew. I found him sitting on the porch when I got home that afternoon, his face unreadable, his eyes distant. He was staring out at the street, but when I stepped onto the porch, he turned toward me, his expression softening just a little. It was as if he wanted to say something, but the words weren't coming easily. I sat down beside him, not knowing where to begin. We sat in silence for a long time before he finally spoke. "I've been thinking a lot," he started, his voice low. "And I keep asking myself why. Why did you do it? Why did you go to him? Was it just because I wasn't paying attention? Was it because I wasn't enough for you?" His questions cut deeper than I was ready for. It felt like he was asking me to explain myself, but I didn't have the answers. I didn't have a good enough reason, and that realization made the guilt feel even heavier. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain something like this? How do you justify the choices you make when you know they're wrong, but you do them anyway? "I don't know," I whispered, my voice trembling. I felt invisible. I felt like I didn't matter to you anymore. And when I saw John again, it was like I remembered who I was before. Before all this. Before everything. His face was a mixture of hurt and confusion, as if he couldn't comprehend how we'd ended up here. I could see the cracks in his armor, the vulnerability that he hadn't shown me in so long. He was just as lost as I was. "I never meant for it to happen this way," I continued. "I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't even want to hurt myself. But when I was with him, I don't know, it felt like a way out. A way to feel important again." He looked away for a moment, taking in what I had said. I could see him processing it, trying to understand. But I knew that nothing I could say would change the fact that I had broken his trust. I had broken us. "You know, I always thought I knew you," he said softly. "But now, I don't even know who you are anymore. You did something to me. Something I can't just forget. Something I can't just let go." I felt my chest tighten at his words. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt him. It was the fact that he felt like he didn't even know me anymore. That hurt more than anything. "I'm sorry," I said again, but the apology felt like it was never going to be enough. "I wish I could take it all back, but I can't." He nodded slowly, like he had already come to terms with that. I know you can't. But that doesn't mean we can just keep pretending that this isn't a big deal." His words hit me harder than anything I had imagined. This wasn't something we could just sweep under the rug. This wasn't something we could fix with apologies and promises. We had crossed a line, and the consequences were something we were both going to have to live with. "I don't know what to do," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I don't know if we can fix this." He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw the pain in his eyes. It was raw. Honest. He wasn't just angry with me, he was devastated by what I had done, and he had every right to be. "I don't know if we can either," he said quietly. "But I'm not sure I can keep going like this. Not after what you did. Not after how it's made me feel." The silence that followed was deafening. I wanted to say something, anything, to fix it. But the truth was, I knew it was too late for that. There was no going back now. No undoing the hurt I had caused. "I never thought it would come to this," he continued, almost to himself. "I never thought you would betray me. I thought we were stronger than that." His words echoed in my mind as I sat there beside him. The person I had been, The person I thought I was gone. And in her place was someone who had made the worst choice of her life. Maybe this is the end, then? I whispered. Maybe we can't come back from this. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he stood up, walked to the edge of the porch, and looked out at the street again. I knew that he was thinking, processing, and I knew that whatever decision he made, it was going to be one that would change both of our lives forever. I don't know, he said finally. I need time to think, to figure out if I can ever forgive you. If I can ever trust you again. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know what to say. So I just sat there, feeling the weight of my actions settle over me like a heavy fog. This was the cost of my choices. This was what betrayal looked like. And in that moment, I wasn't sure if there was any way to make it right. I wasn't sure if we could ever fix what was broken. The following weeks felt like I was living in a world of gray. Everything seemed muted, as if the colors had drained out of my life. I went through the motions, but nothing felt real anymore. Every time I looked at him, I saw the hurt in his eyes. A hurt I couldn't undo, no matter how much I wanted to. He took some time away from home after that conversation. He didn't leave for good, but he started staying with a friend for a few days each week. It was his way of giving himself space to think, and it was the hardest thing I've ever had to experience. The house felt empty without him. The silence between us was louder than any argument we'd ever had. I missed him more than I had ever thought possible, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't ask him to come back until he was ready. Until he could look at me without seeing the woman who had betrayed him. I tried to keep myself busy. I went back to work, threw myself into projects, hung out with friends, but it was like I was living in a haze. Every conversation felt surface level, and I couldn't escape the gnawing feeling that I had lost something irreplaceable. There were days when I felt like I couldn't breathe, like the weight of my guilt was crushing me from the inside. And then there were days when I convinced myself that maybe this was for the best. That maybe we had both been stuck in a cycle that wasn't healthy for either of us. That maybe this was just a wake-up call, a catalyst for change. But deep down, I knew the truth: I had broken us. And I didn't know if we could ever come back from it. One evening, he came back home earlier than expected. He didn't say much at first, just walked in and dropped his bag by the door. It was like everything had shifted again. There was still a distance between us, but now it felt different. Less angry, more resigned. "I've been thinking," he said after a long silence, "about everything. About us." I held my breath, my heart racing. I didn't know what was coming next. Part of me was hoping for some kind of miracle. Some grand gesture that would make everything better. But I knew better. There were no shortcuts, no quick fixes to what had happened. "I've been trying to understand why you did it," he continued. "Trying to understand why I wasn't enough for you. And I guess, at the end of the day, I have to accept that it's not just about me. It's about you. It's about what you were looking for, and what I couldn't give you." His words were like a punch to my chest. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't accusing me. He was just accepting it. And that made it hurt even more, because I knew he wasn't just angry at me. He was angry at himself for not seeing the signs, for not being able to fix whatever it was that I had needed. "I don't know if I can forgive you for this," he said quietly. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again. But I do know this: I can't live in this limbo anymore. I can't keep pretending like we're okay when we're not." His words hung in the air like a verdict, and for a long moment, neither of us said anything. I wanted to reach out to him, to tell him that I was sorry, that I would do anything to make things right. But I knew that my words didn't mean anything anymore. It wasn't about what I could say. It was about whether or not we could rebuild what had been broken. "I think it's time for us to make a decision," he continued, his voice steady but full of sadness. "We can either try to move forward, together or apart. But I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending that I don't feel the distance between us. I need to figure out what I want. And so do you." It felt like the floor had fallen out from beneath me. We were standing on the edge of something that could either bring us closer together or tear us apart forever. And there was nothing I could do to change it. The ball was in his court now. The choice, in the end, was his. "I don't want to lose you," I whispered, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "I don't want this to be the end." He looked at me for a long time, his eyes searching mine for something. Some trace of the woman I used to be, the woman who hadn't hurt him. But that woman was gone. I was still here, but I wasn't the same, and neither was he. "I don't know what we're supposed to do next," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if we can fix this, but I do know that I need time. Time to think, time to figure out if I can ever trust you again. And time for you to figure out if this, us, is what you really want." That was the hardest part, not knowing. Not knowing what was going to happen next. Not knowing if we could ever come back from this. He wasn't closing the door completely, but he wasn't opening it wide, either. He was giving me the space to think, to make a decision. But in doing that, he was also leaving me with the uncertainty of what would happen to us. I knew I couldn't fix this on my own. I knew I had to give him the time he needed, even if it meant losing him in the process. But deep down, I didn't know if there was anything I could do to repair the damage I had caused. And even worse, I didn't know if he would ever look at me the same way again.